In a little town called Meadowsweet lived a group of friends. They were not ordinary friends. They were furry friends with a very big dream. There was Barnaby, a badger who was very clever. He loved to read big books about stars. There was Squeaky, a tiny mouse who was very brave. She could climb anything. And there was Horace, a large and gentle bear. Horace was strong and could lift heavy things. They all looked up at the night sky. They saw the moon, a big silver coin. They saw the stars like tiny diamonds scattered on black velvet. They wanted to go there. They wanted to fly up, up, up into space. Their dream was a secret whispered in the twilight hours. Barnaby would pore over his star charts, his little badger claws tracing paths between constellations he called the Great Wombat and the Flying Squirrel. He would talk for hours about nebulae that looked like cosmic candy floss, and planets that might be made of cheese. Squeaky, ever practical, would listen intently, her whiskers twitching with excitement. She imagined scampering across the moon's dusty surface, leaving the tiniest footprints in history. Horace would just smile, a deep rumbling sound in his chest, and nod. He trusted his friends completely. If Barnaby said they could fly to the stars, then they would fly to the stars. The idea was a little seed that grew and grew. At first it was just a silly thought, something to laugh about while munching on honey cakes. But Barnaby was serious. He started drawing plans on old bits of parchment. He drew rockets with pointy noses and big fins. He drew control panels with lots of buttons and levers. Squeaky would add her own ideas, suggesting places to store extra cheese and a special window just for looking out. Horace would offer practical advice like making the seats extra comfy for a long journey. Their little clubhouse, once a place for games and naps, slowly transformed into a mission control center. And so the Cosmic Tales crew was born. They made a pact, a very solemn promise sworn over a shared jar of blackberry jam. They would build a spaceship. They would journey beyond the blue sky. They would be the first furry explorers to visit other worlds and see what wonders lay waiting in the vast, silent darkness of space. It was a terrifically, wonderfully, ridiculously big dream. But they were a terrifically, wonderfully, ridiculously determined group of friends. Their big adventure was about to begin, and the whole of Meadowsweet had no idea what was being planned right under their noses. Building a spaceship is not an easy thing to do. You need lots of bits and bobs. Barnaby, Squeaky, and Horace did not have a spaceship shop, so they went to the old scrapyard at the edge of town. It was a mountain of forgotten things. There were old metal tubs, rusty pipes, and broken clocks. To others, it was just rubbish. But to the Cosmic Tales crew, it was a treasure trove. Barnaby saw an old water boiler and declared it the perfect body for their ship. "It is round and strong," he announced with a flick of his paw. Horace agreed, lifting it with a mighty grunt to test its weight. Teamwork was the most important tool they had. Horace, with his incredible strength, did all the heavy lifting. He carried the old boiler to their secret building spot behind the woods. He bent long metal poles into shape for the landing legs. Squeaky, being so small and nimble, was in charge of the tricky parts. She scurried inside tight spaces, tightening nuts and bolts with a tiny wrench. She could wire up the buttons on the dashboard, her little paws working with amazing speed. She even found an old colander, which she insisted would be their communications dish to talk to Earth. It was perfect. Barnaby was the chief engineer, the brain of the whole operation. He had his plans and he checked everything twice, then 3 times for good measure. He used an old washing machine door for the main window, polishing it until it shone. He found a set of old garden chairs for their seats, and Horace patted them with soft moss to make them comfortable. They worked day and night. Sometimes they got tired, sometimes a bolt would not fit. But they never gave up. They encouraged each other. When Horace got a splinter, Squeaky helped him pull it out. When Barnaby couldn't figure something out, Horace would suggest they have a honey sandwich and think again. After many weeks of hard work, their ship was finished. They called it the Stardust Cruiser. It was a funny-looking thing. It was silver and lumpy with wobbly legs and a colander on top. But to them, it was the most beautiful spaceship in the entire universe. It was a symbol of their friendship and their shared dream. They had built it together piece by piece with hope and hard work. They stood back and looked at their creation, their hearts filled with pride. The Stardust Cruiser was ready, and so were they. The day of the launch arrived. The sun was just beginning to peek over the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. A nervous energy fizzed in the air. Horace's tummy rumbled, but it was not from hunger this time. Squeaky's whiskers twitched so fast they were a blur. Even Barnaby, usually so calm and collected, kept checking his plans with slightly shaky paws. Was the boiler strong enough? Were the bolts tight enough? Were there enough cheese sandwiches packed for the journey? The big moment was here, and it was both thrilling and terrifying all at once. The Stardust cruiser sat on its launch pad, gleaming in the morning light. They climbed inside, one by one. The door shut with a loud clang. It was cozy inside, filled with the smell of old metal and fresh moss. Squeaky scrambled into her co-pilot seat, her paws hovering over a big red button. Horace strapped himself in, his big frame filling his chair completely. Barnaby sat at the main controls, taking a deep breath. "Stardust cruiser to Meadow Suite," he said into a tin can microphone. "All systems are, hopefully, go." He looked at his friends. Squeaky gave him a tiny, brave thumbs up. Horace gave a deep, reassuring nod. They were all in this together. Barnaby began the countdown, his voice a little wobbly. 10, 9, 8. Outside, the birds stopped singing, as if they knew something momentous was about to happen. 7, 6, 5. Squeaky squeezed her eyes shut for a second. This was it, the point of no return. 4, 3, 2, 1. "Push the button," Barnaby yelled. Squeaky slammed her paw down on the big red button. There was a great rumble. The whole ship began to shake and shudder. It felt like being inside a giant washing machine on its fastest spin cycle. With a tremendous whoosh and a great cloud of dust, the Stardust cruiser lifted off the ground. Slowly at first, then faster and faster it climbed into the sky. Through the porthole they saw their little town getting smaller and smaller. The trees looked like tiny bits of broccoli. The river looked like a silver ribbon. They were really flying. The fear began to melt away, replaced by pure, bubbling excitement. They cheered and laughed, their faces pressed against the glass. They were on their way. They were going to space. After drifting through a sea of silent, sparkling stars, Barnaby spotted something on his telescope. It was a planet, but not like any planet in his books. This one was a swirling marble of lilac and violet. I think we should land," Barnaby announced, his voice full of awe. Carefully he guided the Stardust cruiser down through clouds that looked like grape-flavored foam. They landed with a soft bump in a field of what looked like bright blue grass. The air outside smelled sweet like lavender and honey. They had discovered a new world. They decided to call it Planet Glimmer. Putting on their makeshift helmets, fish bowls carefully cleaned, they stepped outside. Everything was strange and wonderful. The ground was soft and bouncy, like a trampoline. The trees had leaves that glowed with a gentle silvery light. And everywhere, there were puddles. But these were not ordinary muddy puddles. They were filled with a bubbling, shimmering purple liquid. Squeaky, being the bravest, dipped a paw in. The puddle giggled. It sent up a stream of sparkling bubbles that floated away and popped into little musical notes. They spent the afternoon jumping in the giggling puddles, their laughter mixing with the strange, happy music of the planet. As they explored further, they found they were not alone. Peeking out from behind a glowing tree was a small, shy creature. It had 6 legs, fluffy orange fur, and 2 big, curious eyes that blinked slowly. It didn't look scary at all. Horace offered it a piece of his honey sandwich. The creature crept forward, sniffed the offering, and took a small nibble. It then made a happy purring sound and rubbed against Horace's leg. They had made a new friend. They couldn't understand its purrs and clicks, but they understood its gentle nature. They had discovered that friendship doesn't need words. All too soon, it was time to leave. They waved goodbye to their new 6-legged friend and the planet of purple puddles. The journey home was quiet and thoughtful. They had done it. They had flown to space, walked on another world, and met an alien. When the Stardust cruiser landed safely back behind the woods in Meadow Suite, they were tired, but their hearts were full. They learned that the universe is bigger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined. But more importantly, they learned that with cleverness, bravery, and strength, and most of all, with good friends by your side, any dream, no matter how big, is possible.